Hello everyone, welcome to the Unit 4 lesson on harmonic dictation. For this lesson we are going to start reaching beyond tonic expansion and also introduce the cadential 6/4 chord. Okay, let's get started. For this unit we're going to add in two new chords, the 3 chord and the 6 chord. These are going to open up the possibility for what I have talked about briefly as being the alternative opening. It's that mysterious blank space on your flashcards that you haven't yet filled in, and this week you're going to start filling it in. Okay, so what you're going to listen for is, in the mapping section, is this a tonic expansion or is it something else? Okay, so I'm going to play for you 4 progressions, so just number your scrap paper 1 through 4. And you're going to decide whether it's tonic expansion or if it sounds like something you haven't heard before, okay? Give this a listen. And while you're listening to it, try and describe the feeling or maybe even the genre. So does it sound like classical music or does it sound like it would maybe fit in with jazz or blues or popular music, okay? Okay, here we go. Okay, I'll play that one more time. So this is number 1. Okay, did that sound like tonic expansion or something you haven't heard before? Okay, make a note. Number 2. Go with your first instinct. Don't try and second guess yourself. Just immediate answer. Number 2. Okay. Number 2 again. Okay, make a note. Number 3. Once more. All right, and number 4. Obviously the set 3 and 4 are in minor. Once more. Obviously that one feels very incomplete. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have. So number 1 was tonic expansion. So it sounds, hopefully it sounded very familiar to you at this point. Okay, and then number 2 was the alternative opening. So 1, 3, 6, 5, 1. You can often just listen to the first 2 chords, especially at this point. Okay, so 1, 3, 6, 5, 6, 1. Okay, and the next set, Again, tonic expansion, not tonic expansion. So the first one, it mixed it up a little bit. It went from a 1 to a 1/6. But if you listen, they're both minor. And there's a pretty significant jump in the right hand. 5, 5, 6, 1. The next one starts with the same bass line, but it goes from minor to major. We'll get into that a little bit more. So 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. Okay. Spend some time thinking about how you would describe the difference. How do they feel? Like if you heard it, you might even want to back up the video and listen to it a couple of times because you want to get used to this feels like tonic expansion. This feels like something else. Okay, and that will help you out a lot as we get into the mapping exercises. So this week we've added 3 and 6, and they have very specific roles, especially the 3. The 3 can only go to 6 or 4. That's it, especially within our classical period rules. 3 can go to 6, 3 can go to 4, or it can maybe go to another version of 3, and that's it. Okay, so if you hear a 1 to a 3, it has to be followed by a 4 or a 6. Okay, so these, let's back up a little bit. So this is our tonic section. This is our dominant section. This is our predominant section with the 2 and the 4. And then here's a little thing here. So 6 can fit in with predominant, but it can also fit in with the alternative opening. Okay, and then 4 is usually predominant, but it can also fit into the alternative opening section. Oops, major, not minor. There you go. All right, so try and keep that straight. I mean, really here we're kind of mixing metaphors. So we're talking about the chord progression chart, but then we're also talking about function. So when you're thinking about the certain sections of a progression, so tonic expansion, predominant, dominant, tonic, which is what we have. That was very clear cut. But now with this alternative opening thing and the addition of the 6th chord, the function, there's 2 chords that take on 2 different functions. So the alternative opening, so the opening of a section that's not tonic expansion, can have a 3, it can have a 4, and it can have a 6. Okay, and then it can also have the 5 tends to get in there also as part of it, and the 1. But as far as the chords that offer it sort of the flavor, it's 3, the 4, and the 6. The predominant section is usually a 4 or 2, but it can also have a 6 chord. Okay, and same thing with minor. So here, and minor, again, we can only have the diminished 2, 6. We won't have it in root position. We can only have the 7 diminished 6. In minor, the 6 and the 3 chords tend to really stick out against that sort of somber minor sound. When they open up with that bright major sound, it really sticks out. So now we have our expanded, we're going to start having an expanded predominant section. So we'll have anywhere from 1 to 3 chords really as part of that predominant, kind of an average of 2. So it could be a 2 to a 4, a 2 to a 6, a 4 to a 6. You will often get these sequences. You'll get predictability of bass patterns. So our bass notes for the predominant section, if we're in major, we can have La. Well, most predominant is Fa. We can also have Re, and we can have La. Okay, those are our options for major. And we can have Do too, right? Because if you have a 6/6, which we're not going to have barely any 6/6s this week, but if we do, that would have Do in the bass. But your most predominant one is Fa. Okay, if you're in minor, you can have Fa. You will not have Re, right? Because you're not going to have a 2 diminished chord in root position. You can have Fa, you can have lay, and again, you can have do. So we'll look at where that fits with the different chords in just a second. Okay, so those are your options for the predominant. And then this here is what we already said, where the 6 and the 4 can be part of either section, the opening section, and or they can serve as a predominant. Okay, so let's fit where the predominants, the new chords fit with the chord progression chart, and then we're gonna do one more thing and then we're gonna come back to it. Re, nothing really changes. You get a change here in mi, where you can have 3. You're going to add on do. You can get the 6/6, cadential 6/4 we're going to look at and come back to in a minute. And then la, down here, you're going to get the 6 chord. Sol, you technically can have the 3/6, but we're not going to have any 3/6s, especially not this week, so don't worry about that yet. Okay, so on your flashcards, you're going to mark in do, mi, and la. You have new chords. So the 6/6 for do, the 3 for mi, and the 6 under la. Okay, so one more thing we want to look at is the cadential 6/4 chord. I will post a video to a lovely woman on YouTube that explains it brilliantly. So you will get that to watch as well as this video. So if you're confused after this, go watch that video and you'll get more information. So the cadential 6/4 is, to back up, I've mentioned briefly, and if you were in written theory review, you got this more. But the 6/4 chords in general are very unstable. They feel like they want to go somewhere. They're very incomplete, and so they need to resolve. So we treat them differently. So we have passing 6/4, we have pedal 6/4, we have arpeggiated 6/4, and the one that is used the most often is a cadential 6/4. And we treat this as part of the dominant function in the progression. So when we have our opening and then we have our predominant and then we get to the dominant section, we can either have just a 5 or a 7 diminished 6 in rare cases, or we can have the cadential 6/4 to the 5 chord. So we treat this as a suspension over the 5. So this whole thing, even though on paper this looks like a 1/6/4 chord, we are going to write it as a 5/6/4 to a 5/3. Now in Aurelia, you have to notate them separately, even though in our brain we're thinking of them together. You have to just do a little workaround and notate the cadential 6/4, so the 5/6/4 as a 5/6/4, and then you're going to have to mark in the 5 separately. Okay, so this is a little bit, you have to be of two minds of it. So when you're doing analysis on paper for another class, you're going to want to write that all as one chord. Okay. All right, so if that's confusing, go watch the video that I'll post below this and you'll be good to go. Okay, so that adds in one more chord in our solfege of the cadential 6/4 can be on sol. And it has to be followed by the 5 or the 5/7. Okay, so its existence is dependent on its function. Okay, so there's chords that we can have in different functions, like the 5 can be part of the tonic expansion, or it could be part of the dominant at the end, at the cadence. The 1 can kind of float around anywhere. The 4 can be part of the predominant or the alternative opening. The cadential 6/4 has to be part of the dominant section in order to exist. Okay, that's it. So if you see a 1/6/4 chord somewhere else, then it's a passing 6/4 or a pedal 6, some other kind of 6/4 chord. Good. This is the same chart of minor, so take a look at that. Okay, so in our mapping, it's going to get more complicated, and we're going to walk through this and do some practice with it, so it'll be okay. So first question, is it tonic expansion or is it something else? That's your first question. Second question, where does the predominant section start? Okay. Third question, where does the dominant section start? And last question, if you still have listenings left And if it is tonic expansion, back to our original question, where are the tonic chords and where are the dominant chords? Okay. That is it. So let's jump in and do some practice. Go ahead and copy down this bass line. And then we're going to jump over to Aurelia and do the practice there. All right. So this collection of exercises will be available for you on Canvas. So if you want to jump in and practice them again after the video is done, that's cool. You can totally do that. It's not even extra credit. It's just extra practice for you if you want it. So let's get started. So what you're going to do for the mapping section, you're going to listen. It's just a course, so you get as many lessons as you want. You are going to tell me if it's on the first chord you're going to mark as a tonic expansion or alternative opening. And then you're going to skip ahead and tell me where the predominant section starts and where the dominant section starts. And then the last one, we can just go ahead and put tonic. Isn't that fun? Okay, so let's listen. Let's listen twice and then decide if it's tonic expansion or alternative opening. Okay, and then if you notice what I just did, I hit the little circle. That's my MIDI mixer. I'm going to turn up part 1. I'm going to turn down part 2 so that I can hear. Part 2 is the bass and part 1 is the right hand chords. So it's keyboard style. So you should be able to hear the chords a little better. Let's listen again. Okay, so that was an alternative opening. Okay, so we're going to wait to fill in this. Let's skip ahead. So if you're not quite sure where the predominant section ends, you can ask yourself a question. Is there one dominant chord or is there two? Is there a big skip in the bass of sol, sol, do, or it's not on pitch? Or is it sol, sol, do, or is it just sol, do? Okay. If there's one dominant chord, then it's here. If there's two dominant chords, then it's here. And then listen for kind of, you won't always get this, but if there is a little sort of like mini cadence before the predominant section, so that wraps up the opening section, then the predominant starts, that will give you a clear break. Sometimes you'll get a clear break, sometimes you won't, but listen to see if you can hear that. Okay, so for time's sake, we're going to go ahead and look at the answer. So there's one dominant chord. There's a little bit of a cadence here, which means that the predominant section starts here, which means that all the rest of these chords are opening continued. So you're either going to put alternative opening or tonic expansion for the first chord and then opening continued for the rest of them. Okay. Go ahead and submit. So now at this point, if you had tonic expansion, you would want to take one more listening and ask yourself, where are my tonic chords and where are my dominant chords? What you could also do is take one more listening and see if you can gather any more information. Like there's a little bit of a cadence here, which means this is probably a 1 chord and this is probably some kind of a 5 chord, which means that these are your 3 or 4 or 3 or 6 or some mixture of that. Okay. Let's keep going. Great. So now we're going to get the bass line. So I'm going to check my voices. I'm going to turn my bass up. I'm going to turn my chords down. And I'm going to take down the basses to 2 listenings and take down the bass on your worksheet. You could just write out the solfege if you don't have manuscript paper. Okay? All right. One more listening. Okay, so we have an alternative opening at the beginning. And at this point, we're doing a very limited scope of alternative openings. So if you have alternative opening, it's going to be 1, 3, 4 or 1, 3, 6. So that means that our bass has to be, it's going up by skip, so it has to go to mi. And then it goes up by step, so it has to go to fa. If it leapt to la, that usually goes up and then a leap down. You could get a skip up and then a leap up, but this sounds a little bit different. It's a skip and then a step. And then we get a big leap, and maybe that's too much, but we know that we have a little tonic chord here. Okay, this is where marking out your mapping carefully on your worksheet helps you remember all of this stuff, because you'll forget it. And if you listen carefully, this goes up by step, which means that this is T. So we have do, mi, fa, T, do. And then we go up by step. This is our predominant chord, so we can have re, fa, or la. We have re, fa, re and fa. And then we have sol, of course, for the dominant. And then we have a whole note back to do. You could just write in do there before you do anything. So take a look at that before you go on. Take a minute and write out what your chord options are for these chords. Okay, so you know you have a 1 chord here. This is probably a 3 chord. This is most likely a 4 chord. Kind of has to be a 1, 3, and 4. T, probably a 5, 6 or 6, 5. So you want to listen to hear if that's a 5, 6 or 5, 6, 5. Then we go to 1. Then re has to be a 2. Fa could be a 2, 6 or a 4. So listen if the chord changes or if it just has a big leap to a different inversion. And then is this a 5 or a 5, 7? And then we have 1. So you have most of your chords settled. So let's do some listenings for the chords and see how we do. Okay, go ahead and hit play. Okay, I'm going to go and fill in what I know. I know I have a 1 chord to start, and then I know I have a 3 chord, and I know I have a 4 chord because of the bass lines. And the bass line combined with the function tells us that those are the only chords we can have, right? We have alternative opening with do, mi, fa. Has to be, by the way, do, mi, fa is a big hint that you have, no, skip that. Okay, so we have do, mi, fa combined with alternative opening, which means we have 1, 3, 4. And then here we know we have some kind of 5. It's either 6 or 6, 5. We're not sure. So let's actually just leave that. I can't delete it. So let's just do a 5, 6 for now, and then we'll listen and see if we hear the 7th. To a 1. To a, has to be 2 because it's on re, and then we don't know if this is a 4 or a 2, 6. We know this is a 5, but it could be a 5/7, so we'll leave that blank. And then we know that this is a 1. So you're listening for this, this, and this. And let's turn up our right hand. Oops, wrong way. There we go. Oh, I did the thing. Okay. Don't do that. Just hit the replay button. So this feels like a different chord. And it feels like a different quality, right? It goes from minor to major. Listen for that. So if it goes from minor to major, it's a 2 and a 4. Here, still not sure. So you're listening for, does this sound crunchy or major? And does this sound crunchy or major? Take a listen. One more listening. Ready? Okay, so your answer, this is a 5/6/5. And this, it's a little bit harder here. You'll see when you see the orchestration, it's more spread out, but it is a 5/7. Okay. There you go. So let's listen with the answer on the page. The other thing between the 2 and the 4, so if this was a 2 to a 2/6, most likely all of these notes would change. They would go to a different, it would either pop down or it would pop up. Probably pop down for contrary motion, that would get really low and kind of muddy. Be a bad choice. But you would have to change, or it would stay completely the same. Okay. So you would get more change, and here you only have one note changing. So that is also a big clue that it's a 2 to a 4. Okay, let's go and try one more. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, more to just show you a couple of concepts rather than try and get all the answers right. If you want to try it on your own, I would recommend going and doing the class practice. Okay, which will be the same thing. So, okay, let's give it a listen real quick. So we're listening for tonic expansion or alternative opening. Where are the predominants and what's going on with the dominant and the tonic section? Did you hear that? So that means immediately we can write down dominant, dominant, tonic, which means this is at least, there's at least one predominant, right? So you can put predominant there. And let's listen again at the beginning, one more for the tonic expansion versus alternative opening. Listen very carefully to those first 2 chords. That will give you your answer. Okay, so it was minor to a bright major chord. That means that you have alternative opening, especially because it felt different than a 1 to a 5. It feels like you want to listen a few times for that. So it sounds different than it's a different kind of bright. So it's alternative opening, and then we get a bit of a cadence right here. So that's the end of our opening, and the start of the predominant is here. And let's fill in the rest of that. Okay. Good. Moving on to the bass. So I already told you, we already heard that we have sol, sol, do. Now there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 chords. So your do, you're gonna have sol, do here, and then just a placeholder note. So you have sol, sol, do. You already have 3 bass notes. Okay. So now let's get the rest of the bass line. Try and see if you can do it in one listening. All right. See if you can get it. Not too many notes. Okay, so it's maybe a little bit too tricky for one listening, but let me show you. There is, because we know we have alternative opening, we're going to go to the 3 to start. And this is just for this week. It's going to get harder next week. But you're going to go to 1, 3, and then it skips up and leaps down. So we know that it has to go do, me, lay. Okay. And then does it go down to sol for a 5, or does it go up to T for a 5, 6? And then we know that we end on a tonic chord there, probably in root position, maybe first inversion, but we'll put in a do there right now. And then there's some funny stuff going on here. So don't ask yourself what this leap is. Ask yourself, how do you get to sol? Okay. Are you going up to fa and then up to lay and then down to sol, or are you going up to fa? Yeah, or are you going, so are you going up to fa, up to lay, and down to sol, or are you going up to lay, down to fa, and then up to sol? Got it? So if you're going, you can't have re, and we're not going to have 6, 6, so it has to be fa or lay. So your question is, how do you get to sol? Are you going up by step or down by step? Let's listen. So if you heard, it leapt up and then it went down and then back up to sol. So that means it's lay, fa, sol. And here it just went down by step to sol, up to do. Okay? Good. If that went a bit fast, I recommend doing it again in the practice. Let's look at our chords. So before we begin, I should have done this before, but we had do, so that has to be a 1 chord. And then we have alternative opening combined with me, lay. So that has to be a 3. Now in minor, you have to pick 3. Don't just ignore the 3 augmented. That's for a different chord that we're not going to get to in this class. You can just ignore it. Okay, and then we have a major 6 in root position. And then do we have a 5 or a 5, 7? And then we have a 1. And then we have, because it's going up to lay, it could be a major 6 or it could be a minor 4, 6. And then fa could be a diminished 2, 6, or it could be a minor 4. So major or minor, minor or diminished. Major or minor on this chord, on chord number 6. And then on chord number 7, is it minor 4 or diminished 2, 6? And then here we have a cadential 6, 4, which you're going to write as 5, 6/4. And then here you're going to either put 5 or 5/7. And then here 1. So let's listen. How about a couple times to decide what those chords are? One more listening. Okay, so we had just a major 5, a 1. This chord was major, so it's a 6. This chord was diminished, so it's a diminished 2, 6, 5, 6, 4 to just a plain old 5, no 5/7, and then a 1. Great, so let's listen with everything written out for us. Okay, so that is it. So let's take a break, go do your harmonic dictation practice, and then come back for the melodic dictation lesson. I will see you there. Bye.